This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social. I'm delighted to be joined here by former two-weight world champion, the Magic Man, Paulie Malignaggi. We're at James DeGale's media workout ahead of his fight with Chris Eubank Jr. How are you, Paulie?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. So, talk to me about the fight, James DeGale versus Chris Eubank Jr.
I think it's a very good fight. I think from a standpoint of a big fight in the UK, this kind of ticks all the boxes, you know. And it's a fight where both guys have a lot on the line as well. So I think the emotions will be high, and there'll be a lot of passionate fans on fight night.
How much of an impact do you think this has on the world level at the super middleweights?
I think it has plenty of impact. The super middleweight division is chock full of young champions who kind of were very good and in their prime, but at the same time they're also guys who need some relevant names on their resume, or have to at least try to attempt to beat relevant names on their resume. So I think the winner of this fight can easily walk himself into a title shot with any of those super middleweights who are looking to add big names to their resume. And of course, in turn, it gives the winner of this fight an opportunity to knock off one of the young names and become champion again.
Now, the last time we saw James DeGale in the ring was when he won his world title back against Caleb Truax. By James's own admission, both Truax fights, he was below his best. Why do you think that was?
Well, the first fight I think was just a lack of motivation, maybe distraction, or maybe not taking Truax so seriously, and also a very motivated Truax. You have to give Caleb Truax all the credit in the world for coming the way he did and doing what he did. I think the rematch, he was more conditioned by the terrible blown call by Robert Byrd, where he called the early cut from a punch instead of a headbutt, and that forced DeGale to kind of kick things up a little earlier than he wanted to, and push the pace more than he wanted to, and kind of abandon the game plan and try to win rounds and try to make sure he didn't get stopped, including being aggressive while not being able to see, because now you're forced into a situation where you have to fight because you can't even afford the fight to get stopped and go to the cards, as opposed to had the call not been blown, I think James could have sat back and boxed intelligently even despite the cut, and if the fight gets stopped, it gets stopped and he wins on the scorecards, but I think the call really conditioned James' performance, and unfortunately it didn't give us the proper perspective on what adjustments he had made for that fight. So I think it's on to this one, and we'll see what adjustments are clicking for the fight against Eubank.
A general consensus is that the Badou Jack fight took quite a bit out of James DeGale. Would you agree with that?
I think a lot of fights take a lot out of you. I wouldn't say the Badou Jack fight is one in particular, but it's definitely a fight where it was a very physically grueling fight. But even fights James won, Porky Medina, Lucien Boutte, James hasn't had an easy go of it. He's fought a lot of tough competition, and he's been a good champion. But of course, these things stay with you.
How do you assess Chris Eubank Jr.? He's somebody who, by all intents and purposes, when he stepped up to face the upper echelon and middleweight and Billy Joe Saunders and super middleweight and George Groves, he's come up short. How do you assess him as a fighter?
I think he's a very good fighter. He's still beaten some pretty good fighters. Maybe he's lost against the two most elite, but I think he's beaten some very good fighters. And I think also, he's the kind of guy who has a never say die attitude. He'll beat you mentally and physically. Tactically, he's kind of deficient a little bit, and so therefore, we'll see what he brings with the new trainer, if they've worked on the tactical things he needs to work on. Because I think Eubank ticks all the boxes with the exception of his tactical effort. Sometimes he just doesn't make the smartest decisions inside that ring during a fight. And I think at the elite level, at the highest level, you need to tick all the boxes, including the tactical intelligence. And I think Eubank has beaten some solid guys, Spike O'Sullivan, Yavni Yildirim, but then he stepped up to the level where not only do you need to be mentally and physically tough, but you also need to be mentally and physically intelligent, and he wasn't able to do that against Billy Joe Saunders and George Groves, who obviously have a higher pedigree and a higher level. I think he's looking for that signature win against that kind of guy. And he's looking for it against James DeGale now, who obviously ticks all the boxes that Groves and Billy Joe ticked. So we'll see what kind of adjustments Eubank brings to the table.
Now, you mentioned that obviously working with a new trainer and making tactical adjustments. It's still been a relatively short period of time that they've been working together. In your experience, how difficult is it to kind of make those adjustments when you've been essentially self-trained throughout your entire career?
Yeah, it can be more difficult. It also depends on how well you're gelling with the trainer, so we'll see.
Now, George Groves recently retired. I think one of the first fights that I remember you calling over here was Froch Groves 2. Just a word on George Groves and his career.
I think he had a fun career. I think he was also a guy who never ducked any tough fights. A great rivalry with James DeGale. became a world champion, and I think very meritoriously as well. I think Groves would have been one of the better fighters to not win a world title had he not had he been forced to retire without winning a world championship. Bit of a hard luck guy, but at the same time made good on a lot of his potential. Just sometimes you go through some hard luck, but you're always happy when guys like that are able to win world titles and be able to take that with them.
Are you surprised that he decided to call it a day before this fight had kind of drawn to a conclusion?
I was, but you never know when it's time. Every fighter has to make that decision in their mind. And if George was not motivated anymore to go through camps to really dig down the way he needs to, then he made the smart decision. Every fighter knows that on an individual basis.
Just moving away from this fight, I always like to pick your brains on various other fights that are coming up. First fight I'd like to talk to you about, recently, Manny Pacquiao against Broner. Just your assessment of that fight.
It's kind of what everybody expected. Broner kind of not getting off enough punches and losing a distance fight. It was kind of what the question of was he going to let his hands go? And it's, the unfortunate thing about Broner is, even in the next fight, that's what they'll be asking. It's always the same question about Adrian Broner. If he moves his hands, he'll be able to, put in a good performance. If he's not moving his hands, then, it's kind of a distance loss, so that's it.
You were the first person to fight him as a welterweight. Did you kind of know then that he wasn't going to essentially go on to fulfill the talent that he had?
I just felt like I had the game plan to where I figured out that he doesn't throw punches when he's confused, and so I figured, put him in a situation where I'm out throwing him, I'm out working him, and he's going to have trouble. I had seen the Ponce de Leon fight earlier in his career, and he kind of it was the way he reacted, so I saw that was kind of in his mental makeup. But Adrian's a good fighter. You have to be able to be good enough to get him there, and only some good fighters can get him there.
Rumours that he's going to be facing Keith Thurman. Is that a fight that interests you?
I'm sure. If that's the fight they make, I think it'd be an interesting fight.
Final word on Manny Pacquiao. How did you think Manny Pacquiao looked there? I think, in my opinion, started to show a little bit of signs of some aging. Would you agree with that?
It was hard to really gauge Pacquiao because there wasn't a lot of resistance. So he looked good all in all. But as far as the aging is concerned, I don't see how you can really get a gauge on that kind of fight. He wasn't pushed in any kind of way, so you wouldn't see where the age would come into play. So I don't know. We'll see next time.
Who would you like to see him face next?
Anybody. I wouldn't mind him seeing like a Danny Garcia. I think it's good clash of styles. Both guys would have some sort of advantage, and both guys would be at some sort of disadvantage as well. So they kind of gel well for each other, I think.
I can't let you go without talking about the heavyweight scene. Yesterday, we saw Tinium White ordered by the WBC to face Dominic Breazeale. Just your thoughts on that fight?
I think it's been two guys who have been bringing their lunch pail and going to work hard every time, and maybe not getting a lot of the recognition they may want or deserve. And one of them is going to get knocked off, and the other one hopefully gets a title shot that's deserved.
Anthony Joshua against Jerome Miller. By all intents and purposes, that's rumoured to be finalised or being announced imminently. What do you make of that fight?
It's kind of in the British custom to invade the U.S. shores with a British star. We're starting with a hotshot New Yorker. We saw Nassim Ahmed doing it with Kevin Kelly. We saw Amir Khan do it with myself. And now we're seeing AJ doing it with Jerome Miller. Jerome Miller is sort of an old school, big talking New Yorker. There's not a lot of us left. Maybe this is the final generation of them because the New York attitude has sort of changed in the turn of the century. But you've still got a couple of young prospects that are of that ilk, and Jarrell is of that ilk. But enjoy the last of them. I think Jarrell's a fun guy, and it's going to be a good fight. And I think it's a perfect segue for AJ into the U.S. But enjoy the last of these New York characters because the New York scene has changed.
Do you think people are overlooking Jerome Miller in that fight? A lot of people kind of looking at it as a potential walkover job for Anthony Joshua. Agree with that?
I wouldn't say he's a walkover. Jarrell is a guy who's done all kinds of fighting, kickboxing, I think K1, boxing. He's totally comfortable in a combat setting. So his calmness is what really makes him difficult to beat. He's there in your face, and he has no fear of being in your face, and he doesn't mind it. Having said that, being in your face can get you in the way of that uppercut as well of Joshua. So do it at your own peril. But whatever happens in this fight, I think it's a fun fight. I think they'll test each other. Like I said, Jarrell is one of the last of a hotshot generation of New Yorkers. You might see one or two right behind him coming up. But really enjoy the last of these because they won't be around long.
We're also waiting for a sort of imminent announcement on Wilder Fury 2. I know that you scored the first fight for Tyson Fury quite infamously. Just your thoughts on the rematch if and when it takes place.
I think there's adjustments that need to be made, more so on the part of Wilder, but if adjustments are made, then you're going to be forced also on the part of Fury, because Fury will have to adjust back, So I'm curious to see how the adjustments are made. I'm curious to see the fight. I think they're still, regardless of who I think won the fight, they are both world-class fighters, and I think people are set to enjoy a solid rematch.
One thing that I read something the other day about it. A lot of people obviously mentioning the fact that Fury won the first fight, or in a lot of people's eyes won the first fight. Do you think the fact that Deontay Wilder scored 2 knockdowns in 4 rounds has kind of gone a little bit under the radar? The fact that he potentially may have started to get to figure Fury out towards the end of the fight?
The fact that he got 2 knockdowns went under the radar? No, I don't think it went under the radar. I think everybody saw he got 2 knockdowns. The unfortunate thing is that's pretty much all he did, and I think that there's more that needs to be done,
Okay, well, Paulie Malignaggi, I've had enough of your time. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Thanks, Paulie.